May the words of my mouth and thoughts of my heart be acceptable before you, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Shalom. Welcome all to our ongoing classes in Sefer Bahir. This is now our 6th class in this series. I am, of course, your host, Ariel Tzadok. You find me online at KosherTorah.com. We are going to pick up in our text in section 21. And we're going to talk about the creation of angels. Now, in order to understand our talk about angels, we have to understand it obviously within the context of our text up to this point. Now, we've talked about angels in many other places. We have the entire series of the ways of angels from the magical Kabbalah, if you will, of Rabbi Eliezer Germizah, the Hilchot Malachim. That whole series is online. We have sections about the angels from Maimonides. We have from a whole bunch of different sources. But you must understand that the nature of angelic contemplation is one thing, but in Torah circles, we have had angelic experience and interaction. Let's use the modern term, close encounters of the third kind. Even what we would have had was the close encounter of a fourth kind by modern definition. That's what the angelic revelations really are. This becomes so crucial when you go into the older literature, part of which we're going to find reflected in our text material now. In preparation for tonight's class, we're going to introduce an old midrash which speaks about certain angels. I'm hearing noise outside. Anyway, certain angels that are created on the second day of creation and then later on the 5th day of creation. Obviously, this is all symbolic talk, which we'll explain as we go along. But as I was researching the older original sources of this material, I found something very curious and interesting. In Philo, the old Jewish philosopher from Alexander, Egypt, in the days of the Second Temple, and something else even older than him, the Book of Jubilees. Something that I've always known and seen around. Jubilees says quite clearly that when God gave the Torah at Mount Sinai, He gave it through what we call the angel of the Lord, the Malach Hashem. In other words, it came down to us through what later Kabbalah calls the Partzufim. And in the original language, they call it angels. But what exactly is an angel? Now, you can go into Maimonides' code, and we discussed this in our Torah Foundation lessons, and you'll get a strictly Aristotelian interpretation of angels from Maimonides. And that view, being that Maimonides and rationalism is so widely embraced today, that's what most people accept. But you must understand, Maimonides was a rather controversial figure in his time, and was pretty much rejected by most of the rabbis in his day because of his views. Now, his law code was accepted, but his philosophical code, the Moreh Nebuchim, was literally burned in public. And it's still to this day not accepted, read, or embraced by many sections in Judaism. But, who cares? We're not interested in censorship or the like. The reason why I emphasize this is because there have always been views other than the philosophical view. And that's what we're going to be discussing now. You see, Philo brings down a very interesting choice of language, which I found very interesting. That when he says you're talking about angels, demons, or souls, he says they're all pretty much about the same thing. Now, I understood what he was saying when he said that. He's not necessarily talking about their function or purpose, but, if you will, their nature. Bottom line, let's put it in a concept that we can understand it. Communists, socialists, and capitalists. How's that? Jews and Arabs, Nazis and the West. pretty much they're all Homo sapiens. Now, you and I might say, well, that's a given. But what it shows is they come from, if you will, the same source, but yet not necessarily following the same purpose. What is that source? That is what we're here to discuss now. You see, when we discuss day 2 of creation and day 5 of creation, we must understand it within the context of what it really means, as opposed to just some ethical, moralistic extrapolation. So let's read now section 21. Rabbi Yochanan said that the angels were created on the second day. And it's written, and he quotes here Psalm 104 verse 3, and then he continues to quote Psalm 104 verse 4. I want to read all 4 verses of the beginning of this psalm to put things in a context. It states here, I'll read the English. You can always look up the original Hebrew. My soul, bless God. My God, you are very great. You are attired in majesty and beauty. That's how they translate Hod v'Hadar. You are clothed in this. Emphasis. You enwrap yourself with light like a garment, and then you extend out the heavens like a curtain, whose roofs, he roofs his upper chambers with water. In other words, heaven, the roof of heaven is water. And he makes the clouds his chariot, who goes with wings on the wind. That was verse 3. Verse 4, and he makes the winds his... It says here, messengers, but the Hebrew term is malach. Malach, we know, means angels. And burning fire, his ministers. So the Hebrew verse for 4 is Oseh malachav ruchot. He makes malachav, angels of the winds, or ruchot are the spirits. Spirits are winds. So, what does all of this refer to here? What are these angels? Rabbi Hanina now says that the angels are created on the 5th day. And he quotes here from Genesis, and the flying things shall fly upon the firmament of the heaven. Regarding the angels, as it's written, with wings did they fly. So, when it speaks of the 5th day of creation, when it says that God created those that fly in the sky, the second interpretation or opinion is, those are angels. Now, Rabbi Levitas ben Tavrus says, all agree with Rabbi Yochanan, that the water already existed on the first day, but it was the second day that, as it says here, that he placed the waters, what did we say here? He roofed his upper chambers with water. The water was already there. So it says at this time then, the one who makes the clouds his chariot, and the one who walks on the wings of the wind, but his messengers were not created until the 5th day. In other words, he is again trying to merge the two. But now, let's explain. The best way to help you understand this, I might borrow some of the terminology of the later Kabbalah, the likes of which we've discussed or used many times before in the writings of the Ariel and other Kabbalists of the last 500 years. We've been talking about, up until this point, the visible and the invisible universes. And we've discussed their metaphorical relationships and the symbols of the letters Aleph and Bet and the like. We've correlated these universes to what we call the realms of matter and dark matter. Energy and dark energy. We've symbolically referred to them, as the Bible does, as the heavens and the earth. The invisible and visible. The unconscious and conscious, what some call the spiritual and the physical. Both of these realities are simultaneously real. We exist within each reality simultaneously. Only our focus now is on what we're looking at. Just prior to class this evening, I was watching one of these, again, science programs, and it's called Brain Games, and it was talking about attention. And they focused on a football game. And they said, keep your eye on the ball. The guy is going to kick a field goal, and they wanted to make sure if you, meaning the audience, us, could see whether the ball actually goes through the goal, whatever it's supposed to be going through. Again, I'm not a football fan, so I don't even know the proper terminology. And as the football team was going to kick the ball, the cheerleaders are there, rooting along, etc. And the guy kicks the ball, and it looked to me like it went through the goal, whoever is supposed to go. And then the announcer asked, "Did you see what else happened?" And he says, "Did you see the cheerleaders take off their shirts?" And I did a double take, and I said, "Well, obviously, no, I really wasn't paying attention to the cheerleaders." So they replayed it, and they showed it. And then they wanted to explain how, even though it was something as provocative, because actually it was very noticeable on screen if you were looking, but being that you're, in quote, keeping your eye on the ball, you don't see everything else that's going on around you. And that's very interesting. They gave another example. They had a guy who knows how to play cards. And he took a card out of the deck. And to prove that it was the card, he had the guy, the person who was doing the trick, signed the card so they knew it was there. And he shuffled up the deck, and he goes, "Okay, let's find the card." And he pulled out one card, next card, next card, and said, "You got to find the card." And it took up to 30 seconds or more before the people realized that he had taken the card and literally stuck it in his hat, and it was hanging off of his forehead, right in the middle of his face. And the people weren't even paying attention to his face. They were looking down at the cards. It was something that was such in clear view. No one noticed. All of this is not just to explain to us the psychology of focus. It's to explain to us what else we're not noticing around us at all times. Because we have what has become known as tunnel vision. We call it concentration. But we have learned that the definition of this kind of laser beam focus is the definition of rigidity. Rigidity is what we call severity. Severity is din gevura. And that's the limitation which locks us into a reality, blinding us from all else around us. It's a psychology. It's a mentality which literally prevents us from seeing everything else that's going on around. And that's just the issue. Sit down and be quiet. Thank you. Little Sierra's come and joined us again. Remember, you always got to be aware. I hear these things. And again, remember, I don't believe in distractions. Everything's for a greater purpose. So, what are we not seeing? Well, there's a whole part of the mind that we don't see called the unconscious. And we say, well, look, I got to focus on my real life. I got to make a living. I got to go to work. Yeah. Well, that's why the cycle of life goes on with no greater improvement for humanity, is because of where we're focused. But that's besides the point. As the universe was being created, as evolution spiritually was happening, we must understand that we are not the first creation. The physical world is not the first creation, and humanity is certainly not the first sentient intelligence. Way back at the dawn of what we would call time, what is symbolically referred to as the second day, there were manifestations of what we will call the first ones. Older races created by God for the initial original purpose to serve as His agents in the universe. These older entities is a very interesting question. Who and what they are. Were they actually created? Were they formed? Or were they from a higher and outer dimension, which only at this point materialized within what we call the heavens and the earth, or this dimensional plane? You see, this is the issue here. When we discuss the difference between angels of the second day and angels of the fifth day, some will use more modern terms to say, oh, this is the difference between angels and archangels. But angel and archangel are completely irrelevant terms when we're really trying to understand the difference of these entities. This is why I introduced to you Philo before. You see, the original entities of day 2. Some will say, well, these are the, in quote, archangels, who are Michael, Gabriel, Ariel, Raphael. But you know who they are, don't you? Michael and Gabriel, Ariel, and Raphael are part of a greater, higher hive mind of entities who we have come to call the Metatron. Metatron, the angel of the Lord spoken of in the book of Exodus, the captain of the Lord of hosts, is not an individual, but a collective. Kind of, if you remember from the TV program Star Trek Next Generation, the Borg. We are the Borg. Resistance is futile. Replace Borg with Metatron, because this is a collective. And there is a profound secret of the identity of the Metatron, what I refer to as Metatrons. Michael, Gabriel, Ariel, Raphael, they're all part of this. They're all part of the greater entities that came at this time. These earlier entities were created on day 2. Day 2 of creation is an emanation of the Sefirat Gevurah, the power of limitation, form, and focus, because that was their function. To serve the Creator intelligence, to be, if you will, God's hands. And that's exactly what these higher entities, who come from a higher domain, in the language of the Kabbalah, they refer to the body of Metatron being in what we call the world of Yetzirah. That is the invisible world, which we call the heavens. But his head, they say, is in the domain called Beria, which is in the domain outside of the heavens and the earth, the domain which we call Elohim, or God. Now, this is where we start to get a little dicey and dangerous in our definitions, because the Bible does make it very clear that there are what we call lowercase g gods. Now, I'm not talking about the actual aliens from other planets and domains. I am not talking about the fallen angels and the Nephilim. When we refer to the Watchers, those who God, the author, has put in charge of, if you will, the universe. This is their job, their role. The original subversion into idolatry in the days of Enosh was that people understood these entities to be God's agents and servants, and therefore, if you will, approached them directly as opposed to the source directly. And we say that the idolatry of the generation of Enosh was a mistake of the intellect. Essentially the same mistake as the golden calf. And of course that's why the golden calf was considered such a serious sin, but a forgivable one. Now, these entities are real, they're up there, but we are taught in our Torah that like us, they are created beings, even though they are first ones. And this is very important for us to understand. Now, what then is this reference to Genesis, these other angels? Well, we apply Psalm 104 to the first ones. Very curious, bizarre language about the upper waters and what that is, and how these entities are the directors. They are the ones who channel to lower forms. In other words, the reason why we don't necessarily interact directly with the first ones is because they're above us. They are higher up on the chain of command. The image that comes to my mind is, if you will think of the chain of command in a military organization. Let's say you and I are the enlisted personnel. We're the privates, the corporals, and the sergeants. Do we have direct line to the head of the army? Let's use a modern, the old term, a 5-star general. Does the private or corporal, or sergeant as the case may be, knock on the door of the head of the army, the 5-star general, and have a direct conversation? No. He goes through the chain of command. He will speak to his platoon lieutenant, who will then speak to the company captain, who will then speak to the major, or colonel as the case may be, who then goes up the chain to the generals. Understand then that the nature of higher entities works pretty much in a similar type of manner. And that is why we're referencing here those created on day 5. Notice that they are still created before man. These are the pre-Adamic entities, the higher evolved souls that came before us, that have since traveled off-world, and I'm concealing a secret there, and they now serve, if you will, in the universe. And they are the ones who watch over us. And don't think that these lower watchers, who are sometimes called the Ishim, right? Maimonides writes about them. These are the ones who talk to the prophets. These Ishim are the ones who then speak with the higher entities, who we can call the Seraphim. The entities of Michael, Gabriel, and the like. Some say they're cherubs, and some say they're Hayot. Some will say they're Seraphim. And Seraphim, some say as fiery entities, others interpret them as reptilians. Now, I'm not going to go there right now, because that's outside of the parameter of our text. But I want you to get and understand the chain of command. That you have higher first ones, second ones, and maybe, for lack of a better term, we'll refer to ourselves as third ones. So when we speak of the pre-Adamic civilizations, these entities have existed and still do. They are in that dimension, that realm, outside of the focus of our present vision. And as such, like the Carter in the forehead, we're not paying attention. Where are these entities, these second ones? They are all over. They are not necessarily those who we call the earth spirits. Because everything in the universe we believe to be alive. Clouds, water, rocks, mountains. In native traditions, they always speak of the spirits of these places. Well, I'm sure they had the spirits. These are not the second ones of whom I speak. They are the indigenous entities who inhabit our world with us, who we simply do not see. They're not higher than us. They're just different from us. And as such, they exist in a different way, in a different plane. And many interpret these to be, in quote, demons or earth spirits and seek to worship them and work with them. These entities look to us almost like sources of food. And therefore, anytime that we solicit them, they solicit from us life force energy, often in the form of blood, because that's where you get the life force. So anytime you see spirits of violence and wars and the like, you could recognize these entities very much at work, pretty much milking humanity by shedding blood and taking that. Now, these are the ones who are guided, like us, by these called the Watchers. The Watchers are referred to in Daniel. These are the second ones. These are the ones created on day 5. These are the ones, like we said, the Ishim and the like, who interact with our world as guardians, as watchers. They take their marching orders from the first ones, who take their marching orders from God. And I'm not going to get into the whole details of where we fit into all of this as human souls and why on earth we're even here in the first place. But understand the context now. That when Rabbi Levitas is now saying, right, that the water of the first day already existed. What is this water? Remember it says in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters? What the heck is that? That water, remember we spoke about the Tohu and the Bohu, and we spoke about the Hiyuli, the Prima Matter, and then the existence of all energy prior to its concealment into forms, which then broke up into what we call the 4 compounds of matter: plasma, air, liquid, solids. And that everything in the universe is pretty much a bunch of subatomic particles, which then take forms, which rise up and combine to be the structures of everything that we know. But ultimately down at the subatomic level, all we got are these little blue, green, and red marbles. And they're each taking individual different forms. Well, that's pretty much the reality of things. And the water that existed in them was the spirit of life. And in order for it to be life, it had to be conscious. In order for it to be conscious, it had to have will. And therefore it was the Hiyuli, the Prima Matter, what we call the original Tohu. This is the original water. So when it says here that God, if you will, roobs the upper chambers with the water. In other words, whatever structure we have in the universe, and I'm talking about the invisible universe alongside the visible, the structure is made by what we call the ether, the Prima Matter. We call it Nefesh energy, Chi, Orgone, life force energy. Life force energy is the spirit of life, and it's conscious. It's alive. Life is alive. Life is sentient in consciousness, and it permeates everything. You really want to get a concept of this? Think of like the Force in Star Wars. Not that the universe creates it, but it created the universe. That's where George Lucas got it wrong. But this is this, in quote, primordial water that surrounds everything. And then the verse now comes and says, right? That says he makes clouds his chariot, the one who walks on the wings of the wind. That the messengers, though, were not created until the 5th day. Did they exist before that? What does created mean? They went through a process of development and evolution, as are we. We are here in these crude bodies of flesh and blood to specifically learn lessons. You all know the day is going to come when these bodies of flesh are going to return to where they come from. Thank God for that. For all those dummies who want to say, I want to live forever. Well, you do, but you want to stay in this body? Everybody thinks that the human body is so great. Man, how great can it be? This body is really very limited. This body locks me into a reality which limits me from experiencing over 80% of life on this planet. In this body, I can't travel to the vast majority of places on the planet. I can't go under the ocean. I can't breathe in water. I can't ascend and fly in the air. I certainly can't go off-world. I can't go anywhere. My physical eyes are limited in the spectrum of electromagnetic energy that I could see, which is such an insignificant little itsy-bitsy amount that I'm missing so much more. And yet we think that our bodies are so great. They're not. And if you had a greater, higher evolved body, you'd know it. But they did. They do. We will. That's what we refer to as the resurrection of the dead, and why the rabbis were so emphatic in referring to it. Because the fundamental message of Torah is that we don't hate this world, throw it away, and go up to a place called heaven and say, oh, thank God I'm out of there. No. We come down here. But we don't come back here in the present form. We come back here in an improved form. And therefore, rather than look at this world within the limited spectrum as we do, we'll be able to see it in the grandiosity of its reality. That obviously requires of us a completely transformed shape. That's what we call the resurrection body. And as such, then, we're able to integrate what we call the visible and the invisible, because it will no longer be invisible to us. And therefore, we're able to fulfill the purpose of uniting the two halves of the universe, which are presently disconnected. This is a evolutionary function. It was instituted and ordained by God in the beginning. It was God, I should say, who originally created the first ones to be His original agents in here. And the first ones, through God now, gave rise to the second ones. And the second ones, of course, communicate with us. And as we all evolve, we move on. Now, very important to emphasize, section 22. All agree that none were created on the first day. It should therefore not be said that Michael drew out the heavens at the south, Gabriel drew it out at the north, while God arranged things in the middle. Right? Because it says, written in Isaiah 44, I am God, I make all, I stretch out the heavens alone, the earth is spread out before me. Even though we read the verses from me, me-e-t, you could read me-e-t, which means who is with me. As if God to say, I'm the one who planted this tree in order that all the world should delight in it, and I spread all. I called it all coal because it all depends on it, all emanate from it, and all need it. To it they look, for it they wait, from it souls fly in joy. Alone was I when I made it. Let no angel rise above it and say, I was before you. I was also alone when I spread out my earth, in which I planted and rooted this tree. Tree? What is the tree? The life force energy. The manifestation and experience of the original primordial will. Okay? Who is with me? To whom have I revealed this mystery? No one really truly knows what we call the mind of God. But why we have, and this has always been the message of Torah, the absolute vitality, the absolute essentialness of the singularity of the universe. One God, no more. Why is that important? So if the Christians want to say, 3 gods, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, and Hindus want to say, a pantheon of God, 10,000 gods, the Greeks say, Zeus, the Hera, and all the rest, think about it. What difference does it make? Who cares if there's one God or a million gods? Well, it all depends now on our definition of God, or gods, uppercase, lowercase g. First ones, there are plenty of first ones, but they act in a conjunction, a hive mind. Second ones, there are plenty of them too. Indeed, many of the second ones, as evolved as they have become, didn't always maintain themselves. They're the ones who, if we will, chose other paths. So for those who say, well, angels have no free will, they can't do anything, they have absolutely no idea what the heck they're talking about. They misinterpret the concept of free will. Angels have always chosen. We learn about those who came down and fell. So ultimately, that is the reality. What's the matter? What's the matter? What's the matter? Shh. Okay, come here. Come here, you want to say hello to everybody in class? Good girl. Don't cry. You see, God works through everything. Even a little doggy here. Anyway, remember, I've always said this, that even though I'm a teacher and everything else, I also have responsibilities. And I sense even the pain in this little animal here, that she was desiring my attention for just a moment. I was sensitive to that. Rather than keeping my eye on the ball, I was keeping an eye on the cheerleaders taking their shirts off. Ha ha ha. No, obviously that's the pun intended. No immorality there intended. But understand, to get my focus here, the singularity, why that is so important to us. Think about that chain of command, like I spoke about. Whether it's the generals or whether it's everybody else. If you are a private in the organization and everybody is giving you orders, you're getting orders from your sergeant and you're getting contradictory orders from your lieutenant, you're getting contradictory orders from your captain, how do you ever decide what the heck to do? You can't. There has to be a chain of command with a established line and order. It's essential for operations. I think that makes common sense. We all know, whether it's in the workforce or anywhere else, too many cooks spoil the broth. When you have too many managers and everybody is telling you something, manager 1 says go do this, then manager 2 tells you go do that, and then manager 1 yells at you, why are you doing that? Well, manager 2 told me. Well, shut up and don't listen to him, you listen to me. So you go back to do what manager 1 says. Then manager 2 comes over and yells at you and says, why are you doing that? And you say, well, manager 1 told me. Don't listen to him, listen to me. And you get yanked around like a yo-yo. So what happens when God number 1 says you do this and God number 2 says you do that? As long as there is gods, there will always be the existence of duality, conflict, which can lead to destruction. So therefore, our message, of course, is the singularity. So when we speak of Metatrons, as the angel of the Lord, Michael, Gabriel, and all the like, and we say that Michael is the angel of the right and Gabriel is the angel of the left, they are all fingers of the same hand. They are a hive mind. One mind. Now, I look at my hands right now. I got 10 fingers. Each one of my fingers is a messenger for me. I can poke with one finger on one hand. I can poke with the finger on the other hand. I can poke with one finger and do something else with the other. Each one of my 10 can act independently, ballpark relatively. And yet they're all controlled by me. Think of the first ones like that. The second ones are moving towards such a singularity. But as we've learned, they have not gotten there yet. So it is so vital and important that we recognize that even the first ones are not the one. They are still products of the one. They are manifestations of, expressions of the one. The angel of the Lord. The one who brings the word of God, called Torah. And interestingly, the word of God, these first ones, in Philo, the original Greek word, he referred to them as logos. Did you ever hear that word, logos? For those of you who might be familiar with a little Christian theology, you might be familiar in the book of John in the Christian Bible. It says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was, in Greek, logos. That was the Torah. I've always told people that was a rather Kabbalistic concept, put in John's words, and unfortunately most people who read John don't understand the original Jewish context there, but what can I do? Singularity. Very important for us to understand. So therefore, whether we contact the second ones as the watchers, and there are ways to contact them, or we even contact the first ones, and there are ways to contact them. Every one of them is going to look to you or me asking, why are you contacting me? What do you want from me? What is the purpose? Oh, well, I want a big sound and light show. I mean, it's really cool. It's not every day I get to talk to an angel. And wow, can I take a picture with you? Can I have your autograph? Wow, I mean, I really want to post on Facebook. But here's a picture of me and Metatron and me with the archangel Gabriel. I mean, wow. Well, that's usually the way you end up getting, turned into a pile of ash. Right? That's not the way things work. These entities, it's like you being a private in the army and you're going knocking on the door of the one-star general and saying, "Hi, General, can I have your autograph?" I mean, the general is going to tear you down. What the heck, soldier? You got work to do. What the heck are you come wasting time? You even have permission from your sergeant? You have permission from your lieutenant or captain to be here? Heck no. Well, I mean, I'm faithful and loyal in the army and, blah, blah, blah. Shut up. Get back to work. That's pretty much their mentality. This is why we never encourage angelic interactions. That's considered dangerous. All the more so contacting all the local earth spirits out there who kind of look to us as food. This is why part of our evolution is to recognize the singularity and to channel it, as do the first ones and the second ones. Like the second ones, we too are here to learn a lesson of creating and integrating what we call a hive mind, all being one. We call that, when it's accomplished, the Messianic age. Needless to say, as you can see, we got a long way to go before we can get there. But this is why we always talk about the importance of unity, building bridges, united we stand, divided we fall, helping one another, building with one another, working with one another. This is how we reflect heaven. This is our evolutionary purpose. And all of the fighting and divisions and all the rest is how we contradict it. So this is everything. Now, let's move on. 23, Rabbi Rahumai says, "From your words we can conclude that the needs of this world were created before the heavens." And he said, "You got it, babe. Yes. Not that this world was created before the heavens, but the needs. What are the needs? The purpose, the focus. Why was earth created? If everything is so good in heaven, why do we need this? Because everything has its place. This universe, in its present form, is blemished. Is it really? No, it's not actually. It's our vision of it that's blemished. When we transform, evolve in quantum vision to integrate a greater reality, we will see things that aren't visual to us now. And therefore, we will be able to interact with our universe in a greater way and structure. It's not the universe that has a problem. It's us. And until such time that we can cure our blindness as such, we're never going to be able to see what needs to be done. So this is why, again, the needs of this world, life itself, and the will of life, that's the bohu. Every form and structure that was meant to come is here inherent for us to plant and grow. You don't just take a seed, put it in the ground and leave it there. You got to cultivate it. You got to take care of it. And then, eventually, you will prosper with it. So what does this resemble? A king wanted to plant the tree in his garden. So he searched the entire garden to find a spring flowing with water. Again, the life force energy, the original Hiuli. That would nourish the tree, the growing of the universe. But could not find any. So he says, I'll dig for water. I'll bring forth a spring to nourish the tree. So he dug, opened the well, flowing with living water. He then planted the tree, and it stood giving forth fruit. It was successfully rooted, since it always watered from the well. What was the first thing created in the universe? Okay? Think about it. Well, Genesis says it was the light. Well, what exactly is that light? We're going to get to that in a minute. But that's symbolic here of the water of the well. Prior to there being any structure and form, there had to be the will. And that will had to, if you will, fill the universe prior to the introduction of anything else. So, in the Kabbalah of the Ariel, we discussed this in the Otzrot Chaim series, he makes a very interesting statement that prior to the, if you will, light of God coming into the universe, there was already the places of the universe ready to receive the light. And these places were not empty. They were filled with what's called a reshimu, which is an echo of the original source. Of course we call that the will, here referred to as the water of the well. It had to be there, because you can't have actually something from nothing. You have something from something, even though the something is really nothing from our present point of view. And those are mind-boggling concepts, because what is a something actually something, and what is nothing? And I don't know. No one does. Life force energy, chi, the original water, existed. The will, the focus of life existed prior to the development of the forms of life itself. And so it says, continuing, 24. The earth was created first, as it is written in Genesis 2:4, on the day that God made earth and heavens. But then the response says, not written in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth? Old question. Which came first? Heavens or the earth? So he says, all right, let's have another metaphor. A king bought a beautiful object, but since it was not complete, he did not give it a name. He says, I will complete it. I will prepare its pedestal and attachment, and then I'll give it a name. So it's thus written, and he quotes Psalm 102:26. From eternity you founded the earth, and then the heavens are the work of your hands. And it's further written, quoting again Psalm 104, right? That he covered himself with light like a garment. He spread out the heavens like a curtain. That the upper chambers he made with water. And then again he made the winds, his angels, the ministers of flaming fire. And the next verse, that he founded the earth on its pedestals, that it not be removed for the world and forever. When he made its pedestals, he strengthened it. It's therefore said that it not be moved. So then, what is the name? Va'ed, meaning forever. The name of the pedestal is Olam. So the world and the pedestal is Le'olam Va'ed. And that's what it means, that the world be and the world forever, as the verse says. What are we talking about here? He's giving us a whole bunch of nice metaphors to explain what we've already talked about in our previous lessons about the Tohu and the Bohu. The Prima Matter, the form and the structure. Life comes before anything. We call this life force consciousness. So, echoing the teachings of the Sefer Yetzirah of Olam, Shana, and Nefesh, we have space, time, consciousness. Consciousness is thought. Thought is perception. It's the manifestation, the materialization of will. So technically speaking, if the purpose of will was to create a structured form, wherein which not only all things could exist, but even opposites could exist, and in connection with one another, transform. That's the purpose of the physical world. And you say, what? Well, think about this. How do we integrate opposites? They obviously have to come in contact with one another, interact with one another, so that they can eventually find merge and union and become part of the greater singularity. But now, let's take opposites. Let's take two groups that absolutely hate one another. Oh, fill in with whatever two groups you want. Okay? Can the ideas and the beliefs and feelings of these two groups ever come together? No. The hatreds are opposites, diametrically opposed. So you can take two individuals who hate one another, bring them in the same room together. How close are they? 1 billion miles apart. Never the two shall meet. Right? And yet take two people who think alike, are in harmony, love one another, if you will, separate them anywhere in the world, and they're still at one with the other. Separate them in time, still one with one another. You see, in that other domain, which we call dark matter or energy, the invisible energy universe, closeness is defined by similarity. Distance is defined by difference. And therefore, when you have opposites, they can never, ever come together. So when you have even divine powers, which are revealing and manifesting what we call the right column and a left column, how do they ever integrate together? We have to create a different kind and form and structure of the universe, wherein which these opposites could possibly interact. So we create a completely new and different shell, form, structure, universe, dimension, wherein which these opposites can take on some form, or a garment, or a shell, or a vessel. And through that vessel, that which is inside it can therefore move and therefore have interaction with its opposite, be exposed to its opposite, learn from it, and ultimately integrate with it. If this form and structure did not exist, then the higher upper purposes would be thwarted, and we would never be able to create synthesis. This final universe of ours was always part of the original consciousness and the divine plan. That's exactly why energy congealed to such what we call slowness to form what we call mass, the form of this physical universe, wherein which closeness is now defined by physical proximity and not similarity. So therefore, which came first? The heavens and the earth. Which came first? The universe of similarities or the universes of physical proximities? The answer is in potential and in thought. The plan was for the building of this physical universe. But needless to say, prior to its manifestation, the other universes had to come into existence so that this universe and its purpose could be established and fulfilled. So when you're asking which came first and which came second, that's a good question. Look at a circle. Where does it begin? Where does it end? So we're going back now to the matter of the waters, God establishing their form and structure. And we say about the angels, everything in the universe works for this purpose. It has purpose. This universe of ours is never meant to go away. This universe, which you call Earth, is never meant to dissipate and be destroyed. On the contrary, we speak of new heavens and new earth, but we never speak of the dissipation thereof. The new heavens and the new earth are when our minds integrate and are able to create the ultimate unity. This is why I confess I'm rather pessimistic with regards to our human future. Because if the higher forces that be wish to intervene and, if you will, speed up this process, then I guess it could happen any time that they so choose to intervene. But if we are left to our own devices and allow, if you will, our evolution to occur at our own pace, these things could literally take 1,000,000 years. And I believe the second ones did take them 1,000,000 years. And they still have problems. But the first ones, they came from outside this universe. They came from that head in Biri'ah. And therefore they are referred to as the Neshamot souls, otherwise known as Israel. The angels, Israel? Well, they're called Israel above, just like we are Israel below. So, moving right along. Rabbi Barachias said, what's the meaning now? And God said, let there be light, and there was light. How come it doesn't end with, and let it be so, as it says with all the other days? And he says, what can we compare this? A king had a beautiful object. He put it away until he had a place for it. And then he put it there. So therefore it's written, let there be light. And there was light. Which means, this light already existed. That's why I say to you, the light was not created on the first day. The light existed before the first day. It was only materialized and manifest on the first day. That's the revelation of the higher force that we're talking about here. This is why the language is different in the Bible. So what is this beautiful object that he says that he had a place for and then he put it away? The traditional midrashic interpretation of this verse is that this is the light concealed for the righteous in the world to come. Obviously, this light is not physical light as we understand it, the light that we get from the sun or anything of the kind. This is the light of life itself. We say that this is the Sefer Chesed, the outgoing, expansive force of creation. This is waiting, as it says, for the righteous in the world to come. Meaning, when we have evolved to a point where we can integrate that expansive, inclusive mentality of which we've been speaking, when we've evolved to the point that we can embrace it, that's the light for the righteous in the world to come. Because Chesed is, again, the outgoing force. The outgoing force doesn't wish to constrict things in rigidity. It wishes to be like an umbrella to include everything within. Do we think like that? Do we really seek to integrate all things? Do we really? I don't think so. We're always making divisions and separations and distinctions. Some people pride themselves on it. Now there are some distinctions that need to be made. But yet, and that's only because of the nature of the times, some people will abuse that. This is what we call the klipa, the husk or the shell, the side of the dark and evil, which seeks to pervert that which is good. And that obviously by itself is bad. So this is what we are. This is where we are. The righteous seek the original light of day one. Remember, that light, that integration is a force that even the first ones are subject to. The first ones, the domain of souls, the Metatrons. This is what their job to bring out is. Our job is to unite with it. So there's a big secret that's revealed in, of all places, the Talmud. It says that in the world to come, the righteous are going to be called by God's name. Yud Ke Vav Ke. And there's a big secret with that name, which we're going to get into in the next lesson. You will find in much of the older literature, there is a group of angels who are called whatever name, and they have Yud Ke Vav Ke as part of their name. Those are some of the secret names of Metatron, which include Michael, Gabriel, Raziel, and the rest. Those are just, if you will, titles. Michael, there is no real name by that name. It means who is like God. That's not Michael's real name. You will find that many of the angels ending in El are usually just forces of nature, and not necessarily the first ones, but those who act by them and for them. They're an intermediary group, if you will. They're not even the second ones. They're kind of like above the seconds, but below the first. Like I said, a chain of command. But okay, I hope then that you understand the focus and the relationship here. And the reason why this is being emphasized is because even though we've been speaking about these invisible universes, we should never think because they're invisible that they are empty. We most certainly are not the only indigenous life form on our planet. We are not even the highest life form on our planet. Most certainly not in our universe. There is, if you will, a real live United Federation of planets out there. Intergalactic Federation, or whatever you want to call it. And there are all kinds of beings, all kinds of life forms, physical and otherwise, one-dimensional or many. And some say our governments are already involved in the best spirit of our best science fiction movies. I wouldn't be surprised if that were true. But yet, we must understand that beneath, behind, whatever metaphor you want to use, there is still the singularity. So if and when E.T. was going to land, Mr. Gray is going to come down in his little flying saucer, it's interesting that if you look at all of the UFO conspiracies, and you ask, what are the ETs coming for? What's their purpose in coming? All right? What's all this stuff all about? They're coming here. They like Hawaii. They like humans. What's going on? Well, according to the conspiracy theories, all of the interactions with the aliens, and they've got a lot to tell us. And supposedly, the vast majority of what the aliens want to talk to us about is what? Technology? An invitation to the Intergalactic Federation? They want to talk to us about religion. That's what all the conspiracy theories say. They say they got this big, thick book of all the religious teachings of the aliens. And you kind of wonder what the heck that's all about. If there's any truth to it. Was there any truth to it about the fallen angels? Was there any truth to about the, in quote, lowercase g gods? Everybody's got something to say. But ultimately, if everything creates division, then it blurs the singularity of unity. Our mission, in being a light to the nations, is to proclaim the singularity of all. And pray God, that's exactly what this message here. That is the original light in the beginning. The singularity of expansive, integrated consciousness. Which, pray God, we'll get to. Alrighty, we will pick up in number 26. We'll go into more secrets about the Metatron, Yud-Keh Vav-Keh, in the secret discussion of Exodus 15:3. And then from there we'll pick up and go into an interesting discussion about the, in quote, letters, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, and their relationship to the name of God, and the evolution of the worlds, what we've been talking about. But that's our next lesson. So we kind of a little ran over for tonight, so sorry about that. But thanks all for joining me. Hope I'll see you all next week in Lesson 7. Thanks again. God bless. Shalom. 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 Lesson